We live in interesting times for the headlines. Residents of Hawaii are bracing for a rare landfall by a powerful hurricane as they stock up on water, food, and emergency supplies. Over in South Korea, a typhoon named Sulik is expected to pass through the entire Korean peninsula. And a strong typhoon is hurtling towards western Japan, with forecasters warning of heavy rains and landslides, including in areas hit by deadly flooding last month. And the United States slapped steep tariffs on another $16 billion in Chinese goods, triggering a swift tit-for-tat retaliation from Beijing. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And now to the news. Residents of Hawaii were bracing for a rare landfall by a powerful hurricane as they stocked up on water, food, and emergency supplies. Hurricane Lane, which weakened slightly to a Category 4 storm overnight, is packing 155-mile-per-hour winds and was expected to reach the archipelago's Big Island by nightfall Wednesday, U.S. time. Hurricanes rarely make landfall in Hawaii, and the last major storm to strike the state was nearly 3 decades ago when Hurricane Iniki barreled into the island of Kauai, leaving 6 people dead and causing billions of dollars in damage. In preparation for the latest storm, state officials have closed schools and public offices in the counties affected, while residents rush to stores to stock up on water, food, and other supplies. Many were also boarding up their houses.
Past couple of days, it's been like this. We've been busy. We've been just constantly getting cars filling up. You know, everybody's on a panic mode right now. Everybody's filling up gas cans, propane cans, all of that.
Meanwhile, shelters were being ready to open on Oahu, Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. Officials said they would open shelters on other islands when needed. Officials are also working to help Hawaii's sizable homeless population, many of whom live near beaches and streams that could flood. Maui County officials warned that those needing to use Molokai shelter should get there soon because of concerns that high surf could make the main highway on the south coast of the island impassable. And indeed, this storm is brewing out in the Pacific Ocean. It is big, it is powerful, and it's headed to the 50th U.S. state. Hurricane Lane, its name, at one point yesterday, it was a Category 5 storm. Now, it is the strongest classification on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. And since then, Lane has weakened a little bit. EBC correspondent Alfred Acenas reports near the Daniel K. Inouye Airport, also known as the Honolulu International Airport, on the preparations being done in Hawaii before the expected arrival of the hurricane later on nightfall.
Aloha kako! Hello everybody, I'm Alfred Acenas, your EBC Hawaii correspondent, coming to you from Honolulu's Daniel K. Inouye International Airport, the largest airport here in the Aloha State, where the time now is approximately 3:42 in the afternoon, Wednesday, August 22. Don't be fooled by what you see here with the sunlight and the skies right now, because conditions can and will drastically change within the next 24 to 48 hours. In fact, I apologize for the shaking of the camera because of the winds that are starting to pick up. Eagle News has already touched on the hurricane that's hitting the Hawaiian Islands. That's Hurricane Lane, currently a Category 4 storm that has winds of up to 241 kilometers per hour. Now, we're going to be using metric measurements for the sake of our international audience, so to our friends in the U.S., bear with us, okay? It is approximately located about 644 due south of this city, Honolulu, and it is moving at approximately 14 to 15 kilometers per hour. So it is moving relatively slow, and it is barreling towards Oahu even as we speak. Hurricane warnings are already in effect on the Big Island and Maui. So just to give you a little bit of perspective, I'm standing right now on the south portion of Oahu Island. Let me point out to you that general direction right there is the Pacific Ocean. Behind that hangar building, you can see barely the water. That's where the storm is coming from. So what else will the storm encounter once it hits Oahu? Let me pan this for a bit. Bear with me. And let me show you a glimpse of Diamond Head. I'm not sure if you can see the road sign there, but you can see a bit of Diamond Head, and behind it some high-rise towers from Waikiki and downtown Honolulu. So all these places, all these buildings and structures are located south of Oahu Island, where the storm will hit first. Right now, forecast models suggest that by the time it hits this island, it'll be about less than a Category 4, probably a Cat 2 according to some models. But unfortunately, the eye of the storm, the direct hit for this time around, will be on this island. So the current estimated time of arrival will be between Friday night and Saturday. What's going on right now with the local government in response to this storm? Governor David Ige has just made the decision to release all non-mission essential personnel from the state for them to go home, get their families and houses and households ready for this impending storm. The public schools, the Hawaii Department of Education, has declared that all schools throughout the state will be closed on Thursday and Friday. Even as we speak, campuses under the University of Hawaii system are currently closed on the Big Island and Maui. We're waiting for more word to see if the campuses here on Oahu and Kauai will close as well. Also, we got word from sources that personnel from the Department of Defense, non-mission essential personnel, are being released for the day, and will await further instructions to see if they have to come in tomorrow, depending on the severity of Hurricane Lane approaching in our general direction. By the time this report hits the air, conditions will have most likely changed, and other things may have changed as well, including the skies up behind me. But what we would like to feature, conditions permitting, are the structures, the places, what government circles call critical infrastructure, that will be important to playing a role for the recovery in the aftermath of Hurricane Lane. One of those structures is right behind me, Honolulu's largest airport, which has a couple of runways that will be crucial for it to sustain increased inbound air operations, to bring relief and recovery assets. Not only this, but even the other airports and other structures throughout Oahu, as well as in the neighbor islands, and we will focus more on that in our next report. So before my camera falls off, let me sign off for now. I'm Alfred Asenas, your ABC Hawaii correspondent, and I'm one with 25. Be safe out there.
All right, Alfred, thank you. Meanwhile, over in South Korea, a typhoon named Sulik is expected to pass through the entire Korean peninsula. Let's get an update from our South Korean Bureau. Here's Charmaine Antazo.
Typhoon Sulik expected to pass Seoul Friday. Typhoon Sulik is expected to pass through the entire Korean peninsula. According to the Korean Meteorological Administration, as of 9 a.m. on Wednesday, the typhoon was near the southeastern coast of Jeju Island and moving northwest at wind speed of 19 kilometers per hour. The KMA also stated that it will likely reach the central region around midnight on Friday and pass through Seoul before going northeast towards Gangwon region. South Korea is anticipating to be hit with heavy rains and thunderstorms and expecting 50 to 100 millimeters of rain in the Seoul area. Special weather alerts have been issued by the central and local authorities to brace for any possible damage. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon instructed the government to take all possible safety measures and prepare for the powerful typhoon as it packs winds up to 43 meters per second. Weather officials say that Sulik could take a similar path to that of Typhoon Kompasu, which left 17 dead or injured and caused $156 million worth of damages back in 2010. The presidential office of Chong Wa-dae stated that it has put its crisis management center in operations to help minimize damage and any casualties.
This is David Sasso, ABC correspondent from South Korea, and I'm one with 25.
Thank you, Charmaine. Meanwhile, a strong typhoon is hurtling towards western Japan on Thursday, with forecasters warning of heavy rains and landslides, including in areas hit by deadly flooding last month. Please be on high alert. Take every necessary measure, according to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to his cabinet members and officials at a meeting on storm preparedness. He urged local governments to issue evacuation orders and take other necessary measures without fear. Typhoon Cimarron is packing maximum gusts of 216 kilometers or 133 miles per hour, according to the Japan's Meteorological Agency. The typhoon is expected to make landfall late Thursday and head north through Friday morning, bringing intensifying wind and rain. Meteorological Agency Chief Forecaster Ryuta Kurora warned the typhoon could bring multiple hazardous phenomena such as violent wind and high tides simultaneously at night. Some parts of central Japan could see up to 800 millimeters of rain in the 24 hours to noon Friday, according to the agency. The areas at risk include parts of the country still recovering from flooding and landslides caused by record rains in July that killed over 200 people. Several cities and towns started to issue evacuation advisories, with television footage showing residents of Okayama, one of areas worst hit by last month's deadly flooding, working to pile up sandbags. Now, some trains have suspended operations and more than 100 flights were canceled, most of them domestic routes. The approach of Cimarron comes as Typhoon Sulik was already bringing heavy rain to parts of the main southern island of Kyushu. Leaders of flood-stricken Kerala state angrily hit out at India's national government for rejecting a $100 million aid offer from the United Arab Emirates as more people entered relief camps to escape the devastation. More than 1.3 million people have now packed into temporary camps, even though the floods, which have left at least 420 dead and missing, are fast receding. The New Delhi government infuriated the Kerala administration by rejecting the cash offer from the wealthy Gulf state. Kerala's Finance Minister Thomas Isaac accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government of adopting a dog-in-the-manger policy by refusing the money. The Communist Minister added in a Twitter attack that if the right-wing national government takes a negative stance on the UAE offer, they should compensate Kerala. Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan called for high-level talks with the national government on the dispute. There are an estimated 3 million Indians in the UAE, with many from Kerala, which has a large Muslim population. India's foreign ministry announced late Wednesday, however, that the government would stick to its policy of meeting the requirements for relief and rehabilitation through domestic efforts and not accept money from foreign governments. It added that outside money could only be donated through Indian origin individuals or foundations. India has a record of refusing foreign aid after disasters, turning down foreign help after the 2004 tsunami, which killed thousands in India. Experts said Indian governments want to prove they can handle any emergency themselves.
This is all the result of a big landslide that occurred a little higher up.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned. earlier, now downgraded to 4, Category 4 lane, is heading for the islands. The storm packing maximum sustained winds of 160 miles per hour. Schools are closed on the Big Island and Maui. The state's governor had signed an emergency proclamation, and authorities are calling this a rare hurricane warning, as this is only the second time in history a Category 5 hurricane has come within 350 miles of Hawaii. So here's Alfred Acenas back with this report and an update. Alfred?
Now, earlier today, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell gave a live public address and update on Hurricane Lane. And there was one statement that he made that caught everyone's interest, and I quote, "We do not want to see what happened in Puerto Rico. And we do that by making sure we're prepared. We need the full cooperation of all of the public, really showing the aloha that we're all about." Now, just to recall, Puerto Rico experienced a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Maria, around this time last year. And even as we speak, it's still going through recovery operations. And just to give some perspective, Puerto Rico is an island which is significantly smaller than the state of Hawaii. And as far as the distance from Miami to San Juan, the capital, it takes about 2.5–3 hours to fly. The challenge now with potential recovery operations here in Hawaii goes like this. Again, we apply some sort of terminologies that government and military circles use. And one of them is called the tyranny of distance. On average, it takes about 5 to 6 hours flight time from LA to this place in Honolulu, if the conditions permit. And so that already alone poses a challenge of the responsiveness by folks like FEMA, DOD, other entities, government, non-government, to be able to respond to the needs here after the storm passes through. Now, keeping in mind also that unlike Puerto Rico, Hawaii also has more air facilities, more airports that can accommodate larger aircraft. And in fact, we have a picture of part of what we covered last year, which is a Boeing 747. Now, wait a minute, Alfred. I thought the Boeing 747 was already retired from service. Yes, it was retired, mostly for passenger commercial flights by U.S. carriers. However, this is still the preferred air freight platform for a lot of airlines and delivery companies because of the ability to open doors forward and aft, front and back of the airplane. Now, obviously, Honolulu's international airport is capable of supporting such aircraft. What's going to be critical, though, is that of the other islands. The only other runway or airport that's capable of supporting certain models of the 747 is the one on Maui's Kahului Airport. Estimate, according to our research, the requirement for a runway for a 747 is roughly about 3,000 kilometers, about 9,000 to 10,000 feet. So Honolulu and Maui so far has that capability. The other islands do not. So that poses already a challenge for those who charter flights. Even the federal government rents planes like these to supplement what they have. And what they have, especially for the Air Force, is a very favorite aircraft called the C-17 Globemaster. This is very popular in operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places, especially in support of humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operations, because the runway requirement for the C-17 compared to the 747 takes only 1/3 of that distance. So the C-17 can land at virtually any airfield, airport in any of the island chain. So that could be a good alternative for those that bring relief personnel, equipment, and so on and so forth. Now, earlier we referenced to you the location of the airport. Again, we're going to pan this a little bit to where you could barely see the ocean. Now, again, behind that hangar, you can barely see the Pacific Ocean. The current elevation of the runway here at Honolulu's airport under normal conditions is less than 4 meters, 12, 15 feet. That is if there are no tides, no king tides, no storm surges, which the hurricane that we're expecting is going to be bringing in. So it's not going to be surprising if part of the runway will be inundated, partial or whole, with water, and hopefully temporarily, because that will be critical. Those runways will be critical for these air transports that I just described to you to land here on Oahu, where the majority of population of Hawaii resides. So that's just one of the critical infrastructures that we'd like to point out that planners are already considering and working out some alternatives to include equivalent runways that are just as long as this, the one in Kapolei around Barbers Point, which meets the length requirement, but not much else. So that's all for now as far as air transports and airports. I'm Alfred Asenas, your EBC Hawaii correspondent, and I'm one with 25. Back to you.
Thank you again, Alfred. Residents of Hawaii are bracing for a rare landfall by this powerful hurricane. A video explaining the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale used to rate the strength and destructive power of a hurricane is right here. Take a look. The strength and destructive power of a hurricane, also known as a cyclone or typhoon, is measured on the Saffir-Simpson wind scale. It rates hurricanes from 1 to 5 according to maximum sustained wind force and potential damage. At the lowest level on the scale, Category 1 winds blow at 119 to 153 kilometers per hour, damaging some homes, trees, and power lines. Below this threshold, the phenomenon is rated as a tropical storm. Category 2 storms produce sustained winds lasting at least a minute of 154 to 177 kilometers per hour, damaging buildings and causing severe power outages. Those reaching Category 3 and above are considered major hurricanes because of their potential to cause significant loss of life, devastation, and flooding near coastal areas. Category 4 hurricane winds blow at speeds of 209 to 251 kilometers per hour, causing catastrophic and prompting the evacuation of areas up to 10 kilometers from the coast. Many residential areas are uninhabitable for weeks or months. Category 5 storms are the most powerful, with sustained winds of 252 kilometers per hour or higher, capable of inflicting lasting devastation or infrastructure and residential areas. Up to 16 kilometers from the coast are evacuated. Meanwhile, astronauts and weather satellites are watching closely the Hurricane Lane, a massive storm threatening Hawaii. NASA came out with this video showing the huge size of the hurricane. Take a look. To other news now, a United Nations spokesperson said that the number of suspected cholera cases in Yemen is reportedly increasing, raising concerns of a possible third wave of the epidemic. The UN spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, said in New York that since April 2017, more than 1.1 million suspected cases and more than 2,300 associated deaths have been reported, making it the largest outbreak on record. Take a look.
Humanitarian colleagues tell us that the number of suspected cholera cases in Yemen is reportedly increasing, raising concerns of a possible third wave of the epidemic. Since April of last year, more than 1.1 million suspected cases, more than 2,300 associated deaths have been reported, making it the largest outbreak of record. Humanitarian partners are responding to avoid a large-scale resurgence this month. Our partners have vaccinated more than 385,000 people against cholera in the high-risk districts of Hodeidah and Ib. Our humanitarian colleagues are also disturbed by damage to health and water sanitation, hygiene, infrastructure due to the conflict. Access to these services is crucial to prevent another cholera epidemic. All parties to the conflict must meet their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure.
According to the agency, some 2,400 children have been killed and 3,600 maimed in the country since the conflict between the pro-government forces and Houthi rebels escalated in 2015. Around 1.8 million Yemeni children are at risk of diarrhea diseases and 1.3 million are at risk of pneumonia. The Saudi-led coalition, whose members get Western political backing and buy billions of dollars worth of arms from the United States, Britain, and France, has waged a campaign against Yemen's Houthi rebels since early 2015. The coalition is fighting to counter the influence of arch-foe Iran, an ally of the Houthis. War has only worsened the crisis in Yemen, which was the poorest country in the Middle East before it started. Since 2015, it has suffered from the largest cholera outbreak in human history, according to Save the Children. And last year, a prolonged Saudi-led blockade on humanitarian aid and vital imports into the country triggered famine. To other news now, Philippine National Police Chief Director General Oscar Albayalde said law enforcement officials are taking seriously the reports of threats to the life of President Duterte. Albayalde said that as early as 2 years ago, drug lords have reportedly offered an assassination contract worth 100 million pesos for the president and former PNP chief and now Bureau of Corrections Director Ronald De La Rosa.
During the first day of the war on drugs, during the assumption of our president, nag-start na yan. Especially so, yung mga allegedly, mga drug lords who paid like, or willing to pay like 100 million for the life of not only the president, but also for Chief Bato before.
President Duterte once again claimed that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency plans to assassinate him and said he believed the security agency could be listening to his phone conversations. The PNP chief said all reported threats on Duterte's life should be taken seriously, especially that information came from the president himself.
We take all the threats against the life of the president seriously, palagi. Whether hindi yan confirmed or whether it's for validation.
In other news now, a man armed with a knife killed his mother and sister and seriously injured another person in a town near Paris on Thursday. The man, who police said had been on a terror watch list since 2016, was later shot and killed after confronting police in trap. The motive for the violence remains unclear, but the Islamic State group claimed the attack via its propaganda channel. Experts urge caution about the group's announcements. However, because it has lost credibility after recently claiming seemingly unrelated violence as it faces defeat on the battlefield in the Middle East. Trap has a population of around 30,000 and is part of the far suburbs of the Greater Paris area, lying about 30 kilometers southwest of the capital. Only a short drive from the wealthy area of Versailles, home to the world's famous Versailles Palace, the town is known for its social problems linked to poverty, gangs, and hardline interpretations of Islam. The Islamic State group claimed that the person who carried out the attack in Trappes, southwest of Paris, was an Islamic State fighter.
C'était plutôt un côté, on va dire, de déséquilibre, plutôt que quelqu'un d'engagé et quelqu'un qui pouvait, par exemple, répondre aux ordres et aux consignes d'organisations terroristes et de Daesh en particulier. Donc aujourd'hui, la qualification des faits doit être complétée. Donc l'enquête est menée par le parquet de Versailles. Pour le moment, le procureur, M. Molins, n'a pas reconnu la qualification terroriste. C'était plutôt un côté...
The leader of the Islamic State jihadist group, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, called on Muslims to wage jihad in a purported new audio recording released on Wednesday. He also called for attacks in the West in the telegram message on Eid al-Adha, which comes as ISIS has lost most of its territory in Iraq and Syria. It's the first purported recording of the ISIS leader to be released since September last year. ISIS overran large swaths of Syria and neighboring Iraq in 2014, proclaiming a caliphate in areas they controlled, but they have since lost most of that to various offensives in both countries. It wasn't clear when the message was recorded, but Baghdadi appeared to criticize a $100 million pledge by Saudi Arabia last week to help rebuild Syria's northeast. He threatened the United States and Russia, who have both backed offensives against ISIS, saying that the jihadists had prepared horrors for them. A defiant Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull vowed not to give in to bullies in the face of a new leadership challenge, but said he will quit politics if his party no longer supports him. Former Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, an ex-police officer and right-wing conservative, said he was confident he now had the numbers to unseat Turnbull, considered a moderate. And with senior ministers defecting, Turnbull's near three-year grip on power is tenuous despite surviving a snap ballot on his leadership on Tuesday, winning the vote 48-35. He said Dutton had yet to prove he has majority backing from the Liberal Party, a requirement for him to force another meeting to have a second crack at the top job ahead of national elections due by mid-2019.
Now, the House has been adjourned at the request of Mr. Dutton, and so I now await a letter with the signatures of a majority of the party room. If I receive, which is 43, if I receive that, then I will convene a new party room meeting. The party room, of course, met on Tuesday and confirmed my leadership by a majority. So we need to see that there is a majority of members, and they need to put their names to it too. The reality is that a minority in the party room, supported by others outside the Parliament, have sought to bully, intimidate others into making this change of leadership that they're seeking. Mr. Dutton, and so I now...
South Africa has accused Donald Trump of trying to sow racial divisions after he weighed in on the country's land reform debate. The U.S. president said in a tweet that farmers were being forced off their land and killed. Trump's tweet apparently followed a segment on conservative Fox News about Pretoria's plan to change the Constitution to speed up expropriation of land without compensation to redress racial imbalances in land ownership. He added he had asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to closely study the situation. South Africa's official government Twitter account hit back within hours saying, quote, South Africa totally rejects this narrow perception which only seeks to divide our nation and reminds us of our colonial past. South Africa will speed up the pace of land reform in a careful and inclusive manner that doesn't divide our nation, wrote the government in a second post. Trump appeared to be responding to a segment on the conservative Fox News channel about land in South Africa and the murder of white farmers. More than 20 years after the end of apartheid, Race and land ownership in South Africa remain sensitive issues. More than 70% of the land is still owned by the white minority, compared to 4% in the hands of black farmers. Violent crime is also a significant problem, but police figures show farm murders are at a 20-year low. According to Agrisa, an association of agricultural associations, there were 47 farm murders in 2017 to 2018. President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to speed up reforms ahead of elections in 2019 to, quote, undo a grave historical injustice against the black majority. President Trump insisted he did nothing wrong after his longtime attorney implicated him in illicit hush payments made before the 2016 election. As experts warned, the legal maelstrom swirling around the Republican leader could further threaten his presidency.
I don't think the president's concerned at all. He knows that he did nothing wrong and that there was no collusion, and we're going to continue. As the president has stated on numerous occasions, he did nothing wrong. There are no charges against him in this. And just because Michael Cohen made a plea deal doesn't mean that that implicates the president on anything. The Manafort case doesn't have anything to do with the president, doesn't have anything to do with his campaign, it doesn't have anything to do with the White House.
On perhaps the worst day of Trump's tumultuous time in office, his former fixer Michael Cohen told a federal judge he had made illegal campaign contributions in the form of payments to silence women alleging affairs with Trump at his boss's request. Cohen's statements came on a day of head-spinning political drama for Trump, whose former campaign chief, Paul Manafort, was found guilty within the same hour of federal tax and bank fraud in the first case sent to trial by the special prosecutor probing Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Despite President Trump's defiant tone, Washington-based campaign finance expert Kate Belinsky of the Nossaman law firm said to expect legal consequences for both Trump and his campaign, most likely in the form of a civil complaint before the Fed Election Commission. Michael Cohen acknowledged paying $130,000 and $150,000 during the 2016 campaign to porn actress Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, a former Playboy playmate.
Campaign finance law violations are civil violations. They only become criminal if you have that knowing and willful intent to violate the law. That's the point at which they would become criminal. So Trump may be saying that he didn't have that intent, and so it was not a crime. There was no criminal element. Doesn't mean it's not a civil issue, and he may face a complaint with the Federal Election Commission and have to answer to that. First of all, they would have to establish that intent element, which I don't think has necessarily been established that he intended to violate the campaign finance laws. He certainly intended to hide the payment. He may not have realized at the time that it was a campaign finance violation. If that intent element is there, now as a sitting president, there's a serious legal question as to whether a sitting president can be prosecuted or whether they have to be impeached first and then would have to be prosecuted. The allegation is that the candidate was personally involved in the violation, and that's not routine. Yeah, I think certainly we can expect that there will be some sort of civil enforcement matter that the FEC will undertake. Those don't become public until after they're settled, and so it may be a few years until that comes to a conclusion. If that intent element is there, now as a sitting president,
Eagle News International will be right back.
that recaptures the value of life, creating your moments, kindling your passion, worth reliving over and over. This is your world, your life, your garden.
Welcome back. The United States slapped steep tariffs on another $16 billion in Chinese goods, triggering a swift tit-for-tat retaliation from Beijing, even as negotiators from both sides seek to soothe trade tensions. The latest action completes the first round of $50 billion in Chinese products that President Trump targeted, with Beijing striking back at American products dollar for dollar at each step. China firmly opposes the tariffs and has no choice but to continue to make the necessary counterattacks, according to the Commerce Ministry in a statement. Beijing hit back with tariffs on an equal amount of U.S. goods, targeting iconic products such as Harley-Davidson motorcycles, dump trucks, and asphalt, among hundreds of others. China's Commerce Ministry said the U.S. tariffs were, quote, clearly suspected of violating WTO rules, and noted it would file a lawsuit against them under the WTO's dispute resolution mechanism. The escalation came as the world's two largest economies hold their first formal discussion since June on the spiraling trade war. U.S. businesses have become increasingly concerned about the tariffs, which are raising prices for manufacturers and could hurt the economy, although the prospect of a negotiated solution buoyed world markets this week. However, Federal Reserve officials have warned that an escalation in international trade disputes was a potentially consequential downside risk for real activity, according to the minutes of its July 31, August 1 policy meeting. A large-scale and prolonged dispute likely would adversely impact business sentiment, investment spending, and employment, the officials warned, and boost prices, which would reduce the purchasing power of U.S. households. Now, twice a day, Chinese pig farmer Jia Teichu's workers flip levers to deliver plops of soybean-based feed to 18,000 hogs, whose appetite is getting costlier as the U.S. trade war bites. The price of the powdery grain mixture, which is 1/5 soy, has risen since China imposed 25% duties on U.S. soybean imports last month, escalating a trade spat between the two economic giants. Watch this.
那这是不是咱关心的事，咱管不了，因为啥？这是政府调控的事，是吧？因为中国的跟其他人不太一样，因为其他国家可能这个底下的农庄的人，可能农民嘛，可能能提一些意见。中国来说是按政府在调控，老百姓没有这发言权，应该是这样。我们现在一直在采用豆粕，主要以玉米、豆粕这原料为主。如果这样是可能会影响到这个成本前提之下，可能是有其他配方出来，这样情况下都会调整配方啊，因为代替嘛。中国的菜籽粕也比较多，棉粕来说，一个阶段也可以加，还有些部分可以替代一部分这个豆粕。
All right, and with that, we end tonight's program. For everyone here on Eagle News International, we would like to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us. Good night.